So just check on the bottom of your screen, you have a mic that should be showing. Just click on that and make sure that it is, so the correct mic is selected, or if you're using earphones, make sure the earphones are selected. And then that way, oh, there we go, the brightness just adjusted. That way, you can ensure that your audio is working. Okay. If we're all good with me commencing with the session, just give me a thumbs up, or if you guys want to wait even longer for more of our colleagues. I'll just stop the timer. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so good evening to everyone, and welcome to SP1, which is about business communication and a little bit more. It's very important to note that this is the first module or first skills program. It is quite big, and it is because this is a diploma in human resource management. So they've bulked it up, they've beefed up the content. Okay, so I have quite a bit of things I want to cover tonight. The first one I'll be talking about is communication strategies. And thereafter, I'll look at communication techniques, language strategies would follow, and then we'll talk about office supply and budget controls, and policy developments, productivity improvements, and then finally we'll wrap the session off with a little bit of to talk about needs analysis. Okay, so this is just the agenda for tonight. Just give me a second. Okay, so that's the agenda for tonight. Let's jump into communication strategies. Okay, so the first thing we need to note about communication strategies is that the model for communication in any organization, in any context, would typically be the same. You always have the sender, the person who's sending the message, then you'd have the message itself. And then you'd have the encoding process, so how is it worded, how is it phrased, how is it developed? And then you'd have the channel and the channels through which the message is sent. And then we have decoding, which is how the receiver breaks down the messages, how they develop an understanding. And then we have the actual receiver. And at all of these different phases in any communication model, there is room for misinterpretation, miscommunication, misunderstanding, just miss all around. Okay, so it's very important that we start developing an understanding of the different components that exist in communication. And because we're communicating typically from one human being to another, it has an additional layer of complexity to it. Okay, so on the side, yeah, I just explained what the components were. So the sender is the person or entity who initiates the communication. The message is the information or idea that's being sent. The encoding is the process of converting the sender's thoughts and ideas into a form that can be transmitted to the receiver. So it's converted to a form that's understandable. Okay. Um, and then on the next slide, we have the channel, which is the medium through which the message is sent, which I've said. Then we have the receiver, which is the person or group who would receive the message. And then finally, we have the process of decoding, which is where we break down the encoded message and understand what is being said. Okay, there is another step that you could include in this model, and it would link back to the sender, directly to the sender. But it's the action that the receiver takes once they receive the message you've sent. So if you've told them to do something specific, or there's a call to action in the message, then an additional step would be that further action. And the sender would typically see this action that become in the form of a reply, or it would be something visible, like a document is sent, or, in our context of the classes, it's me sending a message saying the class is on this night, and the receiver reacting by attending the class. Okay, that's the element of communication, and that's how it flows, that's how it works. Okay, very important to understand each of the components and in each of the steps that fall part of that. Okay, I wanted to just say that there is also a room for what is called noise in any communication model. And the noise are the little things that distract us from the message that we want to send. So if you have a hidden agenda in your message, or if you're distracted, or you're overworked, or there's load shedding, there's you have poor internet connection, all of these things are considered noise, and noise can really detract or destroy the message that's being communicated. And that's one of the biggest challenges we have to overcome as communicators in the human resource space. Okay. Let me keep going. So I just added another figure that spoke about the factors of good communication. So it's very important to note that characteristics of effective communication includes a clear message. Okay, understanding that your message is concise, it's worded, it's to the point. You're not wasting the time with, being too wordy or too over the top. I've noticed that a lot of people are now depending on AI to improve the quality of the message they're sending out. And I think it's great, but sometimes AI can make it too wordy, and that can, create a lot of confusion, or it can add things into the message that you don't really want there. So those are things you need to think about. The next one says correct message. So make sure that what you want, your desired outcome is communicated in that message. Okay. Then finally, then the third one says having a complete message. So making sure that your message makes sense from start to end. That it's there's nothing missing. Okay, you're not going to have to send a follow-up message or follow-up email to make sure that it's complete. Okay, I'm not saying that all of us will be 100% effective in sending complete messages all the time, but it's one of the key things to make sure that you tick off before you send out any communication. Okay, the next one talks about precise messaging, so making sure that it's on the mark of what you're trying to do. Then it says the next one is reliability. So how reliable is this message? Can it be trusted? Reliability comes to the forefront when you're communicating with people that you've never communicated with before. When you're coming in as a stranger, someone they're unfamiliar with, gaining someone's trust via email communication is one of the most difficult things to do nowadays, because it's also a gray area for a lot of mistrust, miscommunication, deceit. All of those things come into that space. A lot of people run scans via email, and those things, that's why reliability is always put to the test or questioned. Okay. And then it says considerations of the recipient. So how is the recipient going to receive this? How are they going to, feel about it? What kind of action would it get from them? And then you have sender's courtesy. So will the sender send a message back saying that it's received, noted with thanks? Those little things. A lot of people think that it's irritating that someone would reply and say noted with thanks or received with thanks, but it's those little things that actually make communication complete. It makes it whole. It makes sure that it's end to end. And not only has the sender received what they were supposed to, but the person who who initially sorry, not only has the person who's received the communication got what they wanted to or what they had to, but the sender also now knows that their message has been successfully received. Those little things just make communication complete. Okay. Let me keep going. So I wanted to talk about the barriers to communication, and there are many, many different obstacles we have to overcome in the space of communication in the workspace. Um, so what I have is just some ideas. It's not all of them. It's human relationships are very complex. People are fragile. We all have egos. We all carry emotions. It's difficult to say that we don't. Every now and then we've all read an email and thought this person's out to get me, and had a negative feeling about that. And we need to work at, being aware of it and trying to mitigate it or avoid how we feel. Okay, sometimes work is work. Okay, so some common barriers include, language and style. Okay, especially in the South African context, we're dealing with a wide array of people. People speak many different languages. People don't often understand that tonality is a thing, and it exists in text. It does exist, but also it's very subjective. It's up to interpretation. We can all send different messages, and depending on who it's sent from and how the receivers received it, they could all have different understandings about what the message is. Okay. Then we have the next barrier, which is the medium and the audience. So if we haven't all agreed on a medium, and the medium is not only, am I sending an email, SMS, WhatsApp? Okay. So I saw your message. Yep, I can see. Okay. I hope that it's not affecting your ability to hear me. Um, but yeah, hopefully you can get it resolved. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to say with the medium and the audience, the medium not only refers to whether you're sending an email, an SMS, a telephone call, but it also refers to the language that you use. Is it a language that everyone has agreed upon, or are you excluding half of the people at the table, by having it in one language, that's not fully understood. And then also the audience, and the audience ties into language, having that awareness of who you're talking to and how you adjust, based on who you're talking to. Okay, there's someone in our session tonight, Mr. Dube. I've noticed that he's very good at adjusting his approach depending on the audience he's talking to. And it's one of the greatest things you can do as a communicator is adjust your approach based on the person you're talking to. If you want to get through to people, you shouldn't force your belief or your approach onto them. You should try and meet them on a common ground and carry the communication forward that way. So yeah, I've noted that. I just want to see if there's okay. I'm glad you can hear me, Komoto. I'm glad that it's working now. Um, Okay, then it says culture of science. So, again, if we're making our communications too technical, if it's too the jargon is too scientific, then it's not going to work. Then it's not meant to be understood by everyone. If I've sent you some of the communications I've received, I'll give you an example. I was doing a little bit of a conversation, having a chat session with someone who's trying to do a research paper on AI in education in the space of scientific education. And the woman who I'd spoken to was asking me highfalutin questions. And at the end of the day, I just felt like she was creating a barrier between us because I could understand what she was saying, but I couldn't give a proper answer back because she was looking for something that was highfalutin and that wouldn't be real. Yeah, she was asking me if I thought that AI could accommodate the social paradigms that exist in face-to-face learning, and I was like, I don't think it could. I mean, it depends how you use it. It's a very difficult question to answer. Yeah. So then another barrier we have here is uncertainty and the public. Okay, remember that there's constant uncertainty, and not knowing how people will interpret or receive a message is a great challenge. And then also if miscommunication is leaked or if you violate some sort of POPIA Act, that is another thing that has to be considered. Okay, then the next one says it says risk. So, one of the major risks we deal with in communication, is that the misinformation could be shared, and that if it leaks, if it's not controlled or not diffused, there's always that needs to be considered. Okay, and then we need to always consider that there are many different approaches to communication. So the multidisciplinary approaches talks to the fact that in communication, there are certain habits, certain practices that organizations have that is not the same throughout. And, that needs to be accounted for, that needs to be considered. Okay, especially when you're communicating in a new context or new setting. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So I wanted to show you guys another model here. So this one is about, you can see that we start with the source, we go to the message, we go to the channel, and then we go to the receiver. And it gives us all sorts of key components that would fall within. So you'll see that when we're looking at the source, you're looking at your communication skills, your attitude, your knowledge, your social system that exists, the organizational culture that's present. When we're looking at the message, we're looking at content, we're looking at elements, what kind of elements have you included? Treatment, so how have you treated the content that you're sharing? Have you approached it with a positive stance or positive outlook? Welcome, Abigail. I just saw that you hopped on. Welcome, welcome. Okay, and then your message, has it been structured? Does it follow a flow? Is it logical? And then finally, is there any kind of code? Is there any kind of, have you sent a message that's so complicated that not everyone would understand it? Is it being coded that way? Okay, then our channel of communication refers to the senses. So, are we hearing it? So is it a voice note? Is it a call? Are we seeing it? Is it a video? Are we touching it? So kinetic communication, it's not a real thing yet, but it could be one day. Are we smelling it? Are we tasting it? Okay. The channel of communication really plays with the sensors, okay? And then the receiver. So on the receiver end, you'll see that it's very similar to the source. So they deal with the same things. They deal with communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social system, and then culture. And you want to make sure that between the source and the receiver, or in other words, the sender and the receiver, make sure that they have that common ground where they've connected and they can agree on certain things so that the communication is not a challenge, it's not a problem. Okay, this is just another model. There's so many communication models that exist. You can literally type it in, you'll see there are quite a few. Some of them I think are really helpful. Others are very repetitive. They repeat the same kind of information. Okay. Um, Now this one refers to the noise that I was referring to. Okay, so on the left-hand side we have our encoder, which is the communicator. The right-hand side we have our decoder, which is, we've seen this before. And then you have factors in the middle. So you have your social context, which is, what kind of social paradigm are we operating in? Is it a workspace? Is it not? Is it a friend communicating to a friend? What is the context that we're operating in? Okay, then we have our physical and psychological context. So again, we're referring to, is it a communication sent between colleagues, between friends? Are we communicating as like within an organization? So internal communication, is it external? And then also, what is the psychological context? Is it from one employee to another? Is it from a manager to employee, or employee to manager? Is it from the CEO to a team? That also comes to the forefront. That adds a psychological component to it. And then we have the cultural component, or cultural context, which is very important. Certain cultures would require certain additional amendments to be included in the communication. Okay. Then we have relational context. So relational context refers to, again, the relationships that exist between the encoder and the decoder, but it also talks to how they can relate to the message being sent. So if we're working on the same team and the communication is about something we're trying to do as a team, then they can relate on that point. You can drive that home. Okay. Then you'll see at the center here we have co-creation of meaning. And what co-creation of meaning refers to is, it's a point where the encoder and the decoder meet, and they can actually develop the same kind of understanding. They can, bridge any confusion, and they can literally drive action forward because they've been able to develop an understanding amongst each other, okay, amongst themselves. Okay, and that's just another model. I have quite a few. I wasn't shy with them, but I'm going to keep going. So this again alludes to the context. This is called the transactional model of communication. Very important, very handy. And I just like the fact that it speaks to co-creating a meaning. So developing an understanding, building it as a, building understanding between communicators and just ensuring that we drive action in an organization. Okay. So now I wanted to talk about some communication techniques. So I just wanted to talk about things that we can include, in our communication to ensure that we're getting the most out of each communication. Okay. The first thing I wanted to talk to is active listening. So does anyone know what active listening is? Have we ever encountered the concept of active listening? Vukani, do you have an idea?
I have some semblance of an idea where active listening is listening with, I say, astute attention to what the speaker is saying, but not like listening and waiting to give a reply, but listening and just giving attention to what they're saying and understanding that.
That is very, very true. And that is like you're on the mark, because active listening is not just listening, it's actually listening to completely understand. It's like
Mm.
focusing in and not hearing what you want to hear, but hearing what is being told to you by the other person. Okay. I've noted that sometimes in the workplace, people want to hear certain things and then they force that narrative. And you keep saying, no, this is not true. And they keep pushing the agenda. No, no, this has to be true. Um, so you have to be cautious. If you're not an active listener, you'll find yourself in this predicament quite often. Okay. The next one is empathy. Komoto, do you want to tell me about empathy? Maybe tell me about it in the chats if your mic is not working. You can try again. What is empathy? How does empathy differ from sympathy? Okay, I see you typing. I'll give you a second. I will give you a second. Ishmael, what do you think about nonverbal communications? Do you think it's, what comes to mind when you think about nonverbal communications?
Um, I'm driving. Maybe if the network comes and goes, because I'm only heading home now.
I
Uh,
see.
but yeah, non-verbal communication is some sort of using sign language to try and get a message through
True.
to your audience that you are communicating to.
That's very true. On the mark, but I think it's also alluding to body language, so how people's bodies look when you
Yeah,
share. So if someone's uncomfortable, their arms are crossed, if someone's comfortable, they're relaxed, they're laid back. If someone's angry, I don't know, their fists are up. Yeah. I don't know. If someone's fighting with you, their fists are hitting you. Yeah, but that's basically non-verbal communication. It's what the body says when you're not verbally saying anything. Body language is very important when we share information with individuals. Okay, but it's very important that we know what it means. Okay, then we have asking open-ended questions. So asking open-ended questions are very important when we communicate because you don't want to limit your response. It's not always necessary. I know sometimes people like to force the narrative of give me a yes, give me a no. Sometimes it's easier to ask someone an open-ended question because then you can really get an understanding in terms of what's happening. Okay. And then we have summarization. So keeping it to the point, not being too cumbersome, not overloading your audience with too much information, which I think I might do tonight, but I have to because module one is very big. Okay, Komoto gave me an answer. He says, um, I think empathy is when you put yourself in someone else's shoes to understand their circumstance. Brilliant. I think that is 100% correct. And that's it's what it is. It's putting yourself in someone else's shoes so that you can understand what they're going through. But it's not to feel sorry for them. As soon as you start feeling sorry for them, you've delved into sympathy territory. And I think in the context of human resource management and also the workplace environment, you're wasting your time showing sympathy for individuals. Rather show empathy, try to show understanding. You'd get a lot more out of them. Okay. Um, let us keep going. So then providing feedback is another very important, not leaving things in the air, but checking in with individuals, making things sure that things are flowing, and just keeping people in the loop. Okay. Then we have adaptability. So remember, we live in a world that is very dynamic, constantly moving. Things are shifting. Run with it. Don't be someone who's rigid. Don't be too stuck up with how things are playing out. Then we have conflict resolution. So being able to solve arguments, being able to deal with conflict when they arise, being able to step out of situations where it's necessary. There are many different approaches we can use to conflict resolution, so we can apply to that concept. But it's quite tricky. It's quite tricky. Someone who's spoken about conflict resolution quite a bit, it's one thing looking at it in theory and another thing applying it in practice. Okay, I'm not the best at dealing with conflict, and I'll tell you honestly, I can get hot and heavy at times. But my go-to response is to try and walk away from a situation, a scenario that I try and step out of it. And the reason why I step out of the conflict, especially when I feel it, is because most times it's probably one-sided. I feel anger, not really on the other side. And the other time, it also helps me to get perspective. Like I need to step away and just think about what's happening and how I can deal with it because I'm a thinker. But all you guys need to do when you're dealing with conflict is try and understand what's happening and come up with an approach, a methodology that helps you overcome it. Okay. Then providing positive reinforcement, supporting your team, letting them know when they're doing well, seeing good work and pointing it out. That's very important. Okay. The next one is assertiveness. So not being doubtful, not being uncertain, just saying things as they are, not holding punches, but not hitting too hard also. And then finally, mindfulness. So thinking about how your message might impact others, thinking about how they might react, they might respond. That sort of thing is also very important. If you want a team to work well for you, be mindful of how your actions, your words, your comments, whatever, how that might affect them. Okay. So this is just some techniques we can use to apply to our communications. Okay. I also wanted to talk about how we can use persuasive tools to win people over, as the book says, to win people and make friends. Um, So I have several techniques we can use here, so I'll just go through them. Using pronouns. So if you say things like I and you, it's very it separates people. It's very dividing. Okay, but if you say we should do something, it's collaboration. That's what it shows. It's a minor difference, but it just shows unity amongst people. Okay. Then we have emotive language. So talking about things that you know that are that is emotional, that is meant to grip people's audience. So if you want to persuade someone, win someone over, share something that has depth to it. Share something that has meaning to it. And that's one of the techniques that's used. A lot of organizations like PETA, for example, would use emotive language. They'd also use imagery to win people over, okay, to win their hearts, I guess. Okay, then we have rhetorical questions. So it's questions you ask where you don't expect an answer. Okay, so if I ask you a question like, um, how many of us enjoy paying tax? You know, I mean, nobody's going to say, yes, I enjoy paying tax. So it's just a good example of a rhetorical question. We don't expect you to answer. We all know that you would, it's not something that is enjoyable. Okay. You can apply the same question to dentist visits, for example, something like that. Okay, then we have statistics and facts. So statistics and facts are used to strengthen an argument, to share something that's true. And I'll show you guys something interesting about stats and facts in the next slide. Okay. Then we have use of experts or quotes. So, bringing in quotes to the discussion. I love using quotes. I think it's a nice way to tie things together, to bring in another perspective, another lens. Okay. Then using anecdotes. I often use anecdotes. Anecdotes are short supporting stories, and you can bring in a little bit of a personal opinion, personal lens in there. And that often is a good way to get people to get to know you, to know your background, to know like who you are as an individual. Then using descriptive and figurative language, so using things such as metaphors, similes, adjectives, describing words. Those are very good. Those are often used by marketing companies, by people trying to push products to the market. Okay, then exaggeration, hyperbole, so making things worse, making jokes about things. Um, I'll tell you guys, we're working on a project recently where I had a number that was very low, and I used exaggeration to kind of make a joke around it. And I think I won people over as a result of that. But that's what we do, use exaggeration to make things seem worse than what they are. And you might win some people over. Then we have rule of three, so repeating things and not repeating in an annoying way, but to drive home a point, especially when you're giving a speech, an important talk to individuals. So saying things like, we must do this, we must do that, we must do that, just to reiterate and reinforce the message you're trying to say. That's what we do. And then also with the rule of three, we're also clustering things together. So we want to tackle things. So think about a speech given by a politician. Let's say things like, we want to tackle things such as education, power outages, water supply. They always group them together. The rule of thumb is three. They like to do threes. Okay. And then repetition. So think about, again, politics. They always have catchphrases they use, especially when they're running for presidency. Okay, you'll see a lot of that now on the billboards and the speeches. They all have a catchphrase. They all have something that they're using to push their brand forward. Okay, this is just some persuasive techniques. Now I wanted to show you guys something. So I'm providing you guys with a stat. So it says, according to a recent study, 80% of communication failures occur due to people not using enough emojis in their messages. Okay. And then on the right-hand side, it says, yeah, emojis have become an integral part of digital communication, transcending language barriers and adding a layer of emotional expression to text-based conversation. Okay. Then on the next one, it says, the absence of emojis can lead to misinterpretation, ambiguity, as text-based messages lack visual and emotional context that accompanies face-to-face conversations. Okay, so I just wanted to ask you guys, what do you think about this statistic? What do you think about it? Um, Vulkani, what do you think? Do you think emojis are this important?
I think in this day and age right now, emoticons are very important in communication, like between people, because sometimes people can't get the expression that the sender is trying to give through the messages when they're just plain text, because sometimes people are ambiguous in the way that they say things, or they're too plain and it doesn't give any expression to how they're feeling about it, or like
with regards, like an example would be like if someone is saying something sarcastic in a text, sometimes some people will take it seriously, because the text in itself is direct and straightforward and it
Oh,
looks like
Fukani's
it, and the
disconnected a little
emoticon
there.
isn't there to kind of push the point.
Okay, I lost you a little at the end there. So you said
Oh, can you hear
someone
me
you,
now?
yeah, you came back.
Yes, I'm saying if someone sends text and they're saying something sarcastic in a way, but the entire text is all plain text. Sometimes the receiver can't understand the sarcasm that's being said in the text, because the emoticon isn't there to follow up, to show
Mm.
them that this is being more playful rather than serious. So now they'll take that as a serious thing as opposed to it just being playful, sarcasm.
Of course, yes, brilliant. So, and that links back to what I was saying. Your text has tonality, and the tonality is very subjective. So, and I think one of the ways we mitigate that is by using emojis, because emojis can kind of tell us what the tone is. If it's something that's funny, then you add a laughing emoji. We know it's lighthearted. If it's something that's serious, you'll have the angry emoji. You know what I mean? So or you'd have a serious face. Okay. Um,
True.
I want to let me speak to, I know Ish, you're driving, but I wanted to hear what you think. Do you think there is room for the use of emojis in office communications? And Komoto, maybe you can type to me, tell me what you think about this stat.
Yeah, let me come in. I think office communication being considered, it has to be formal. It might be a problem to use emojis in office communication. But if it's now limited to your WhatsApps and so on, and using it on those platforms, it then becomes more practical to use. But informal communication, in your emails and so on, I think it might be a problem.
And do you think that the statistic that's provided, 80% of communication fails because people don't use it? Do you think if we applied that principle to the workplace that we might have better communication?
Yeah, of course we would, because now a person is attaching, how can I say, emotions to it as well,
Yeah,
and it will also help to people getting to misinterpretation of text,
that's very true.
because now there's an emoji that is showing what the person is actually trying to say, and give a clear expression as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. That is great.
Yeah.
Thanks for your insight. I do think that it is tricky in the workplace environment, but if the science says it, if studies have proven it, then we have to believe it, yeah? I just want to see what Komoto is going to say, and then we can move on. Yeah, the mic not working is can slow us down. Okay. Komoto says that shares the same sentiments as Ishmael. Okay. Now, I would like to point out something to you, and this is probably more important than the fact that I've shared on the slide, that 80% of communication fails occur due to people not using enough emojis. So I'm saying this fact that I'm about to share with you is more important than that. Okay. This statistic is not real. I made it up. It's completely fake. There's no studies, there's no research to back it up. Okay. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that if we use statistics, and I mean use real statistics, you can win people over. And just by introducing it, you can start having people making the argument for you. Okay. So we start off with Fukani, and Fukani was, he was opening up to it. He laid the foundation. Ishmael said that, yeah, he can see it kind of working in the office. I mean, not in all communication, but he could see how it could clear up some miscommunication. And then Komoto came in and said, yes, I share the same sentiments. Okay, so I mean, we can use stats, and stats are often used this way to send misinformation, to trick people into believing things that they shouldn't. Now, I do this to show people that you shouldn't believe everything you see, and you shouldn't believe everything that's said. Okay, we have to take everything with a pinch of salt. Nothing is to be trusted 100%. But I also wanted to say that we can use stats to get people to believe what we're saying if we use real stats. Don't do what I did here and make up a stat. And then, I don't send misinformation around. But what I'm saying is use stats in your arguments to gain trust. Because if you do it before you know it, people will be arguing for you. And you wouldn't have to do too much work around, getting people to buy into what you're trying to tell them. Okay. One of the greatest things I learned in high school was that you could put stats in your assignments and stuff because the lecturers and teachers don't really have time to check. So you can, always put it in. And I never put real stats in, and they always believed all of it. The only time you can't put stats that is not real in is when you're doing a maths paper because those are checked. But when you're doing English and maybe some of the business sciences, you can put in stuff, and it's mostly all right at the lower levels. Okay, let's keep going. Now, I wanted to talk about learning styles. And this learning styles would require a little bit of insight from you guys. So I'm going to tell you what the styles are, and I'll tell you about this model that was presented by Honey and Mumford. So Honey and Mumford took what David Colbert developed, and they took it to the next level, and they added some additional components. David Colbert was also well known for developing the different criteria. Honey and Mumford just added to it, and then added an additional layer to it. So now what I want to show you guys is what the levels are, what they mean. So on the top left-hand quadrant, we have activists, okay? People who are activists are people who like to go out and do things. They don't even read the instructions. They just, unbox it, start setting it up. Don't even think twice about it, okay? Think about it. If we got a box with the table and you had to open the box and start, there's instructions about how to set up this table. Your activist wouldn't even look at the instructions. They just rip the plastic open with the Allen key and start twisting the thing together. And they don't even think twice about it. Okay. Your reflector on the top right-hand corner, we have the reflector, and the reflectors are people who think about their past experiences they've had setting up things. They also think about experiences that other people have had and have shared with them. So your reflectors thinking, they're thinking a lot about past experiences and how they can use that in this process of assembling a table, for example. Okay. Then on the bottom right hand, we have what is called the theorist. And the theorists are individuals that don't really think about the process of assembling the table or the thing that they're assembling. They think about how it's going to look in the big picture. So if we are assembling a table, the theorist is going to ask, hey, how's this table going to fit in with the rest of my room? How's it going to fit in with the rest of the setting here? Okay. And then on the left-hand side, we have our pragmatist. And the pragmatists are individuals that are, they're a mix between reflector and activist, but in essence, what they really are is the individuals that read the guides. They follow step by step. They're all about follow the process, step 1, step 2, step 3, and they build it that way. Okay. Now, if we look on the outer layer of this, the circle, you'll see what is called there's different labels. So you'll see on top we have the concrete experience, so it's having the experience. Then on the right-hand side, we have the reflective observation, so it's reflecting on it. And then on the bottom, we have abstract conceptualization, so drawing your own conclusion. And then on the left-hand side, we have active experimentation, so putting a theory into practice. Okay, so it's very important to note that when you learn anything new, you'd walk the cycle. You'd go and you'd have an experience. You'd reflect on it. You'd have some sort of conceptualization where you draw your own conclusion, and then you'll have your active experimenting where you're taking what you've learned and you're putting it into practice. Now, I personally believe that you don't have to start with having an experience. You can start with putting something to practice without even having the experience, and running through the cycle the other way around. You're going, you can also start with drawing your own conclusion and then putting it into practice and then having the experience. So I believe you can start the learning cycle at any point in the cycle, and that would determine how you feel about it, as long as you allow the cycle to flow through to the end. Okay. Now, I've taken this model a step further, and I was thinking about how this model can apply to different teams. But before I do that, let me just ask you guys, Komoto, you can type in the chats. You can tell me, which one do you think you are? Are you an activist, a reflector, a theorist, or a pragmatist? Okay, and Vukani, you can also tell me what do you feel like you're more of? Are you an activist, a reflector, pragmatist, or a theorist?
I'd put myself more along the lines of a reflector.
I see. So you're constantly thinking about information shared by others and your past experiences.
Previously, yes, I used the past experience to make my experience now easier.
Interesting, interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Dube, what do you think you are? Are you
Back now.
Oh, Komotso, it's working.
No,
Welcome.
I'm more of an activist.
Activist, so you go out and you do it.
Yes.
Nice, nice. I like that. Okay. And Mr. Dube, where do you think you fall?
Fall where Khomutso is. I'm a very practical person.
You run out and you
I
do.
go out and I do, yes.
It was
I
interesting.
do, and then I see what happens.
I was thinking you're the same. I was literally thinking this guy's an activist, you know? Very interesting. How did I know that? Because I've seen you work, so I think you're a
Yeah.
guy. You don't really ask too many questions. You're just like this is what you want done. Cool, let's do it. Okay.
Do it, yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so now what I wanted to show you guys, well, let me first say it's very good to know where you fall because knowing your learning style is important, especially when you're approaching new tasks, new activities. If you know you're a reflector, think about the past experiences you've had, you know, when pursuing any kind of qualification, any kind of course. If you know you're an activist, then just don't even question it. Just open the thing and do the thing and get it done with. You know, don't allow any other distractions to stop you from doing that. Okay. Now, what I wanted to show you guys on this model is I've taken it a step further. I've added another layer to it, and I'm not calling this Cole's learning model yet. It needs to become famous before I can do that. But what I wanted to do is I thought about how teams can work together and how we can take this model and we can start dividing our team according to their learning styles so that we have people that are out there doing and people that are out there planning and thinking about strategy. Okay, so what I've done is I've added another layer to it. So on the left-hand side where we have our doers, our implementers, I've put the activists and the pragmatists. So the pragmatists are very active technically. They're still following this, they're still following the process of getting things done, but they're doing it step by step. While your activist is not doing it step by step, step by step. The activist doesn't even believe that there's steps, so they're just doing, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's great, but it's a little different to the pragmatist. But it's very important to note that if you're on the left-hand side, you're going to be doing things. You're going to be an implementer. Okay. And then I felt like on the right-hand side, you'd have individuals that would fall in the space of planning and thinking, developing strategies, you know, creating the outline of what needs to happen. And if you fall in that space, you'd probably find yourself better at planning. So what I'd recommend we do as people who manage team, and especially in the HRM space, if you have a set of planners, have them in the space where they're able to develop the plans, and then make sure that you have your doers and implementers rolling and running with those plans that have been produced by the planners and thinkers. It's all about, you know, finding where the team falls and using it to using them to the best of their ability, so that they're actually, you know, if they're a doer, they're doing it. They're a planner, they're planning. Okay, so yeah, that's basically how I took the model a step further. It's not a big step, but I think it does help with the team management. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. These slides will be put on Moodle also. So if you guys have any questions or concerns about that, that will be there. Okay, so now I want to talk about synergy. Synergy is a very interesting topic. I really enjoy talking about it. Synergy refers to the combined effect of the combined effect produced when two or more elements work together to achieve an outcome that is greater than the sum of the individual's effects. So it's when you're able to get several departments to work together, like to become interlinked and to start producing work together, to work with each other and not against each other. Um, and the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts is highlighted in the enhanced performance and the effectiveness of the results of collaboration and coordinating, you know, amongst the different components, or coordination amongst the different components. So, oh, sorry guys, I just think there's something. Just give me a second. So I'm going to come back to the synergy thing. Sorry, guys, I'm just going to quickly check on something. I mean, maybe we can, what is the time? Let's just take a 5-minute breather. Actually, let's make it a 8 minute. So if you want to quickly get a cup of tea, cup of coffee, please do so, and then we'll continue. Okay, I just need to check on something. Okay, so 8 minutes. Just give me a thumbs up if you're all good with that. Okay, Ish, you don't have to. I know you're driving. Okay, Vukani says yes. Komoto, you good?
I'm good.
Okay, cool. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, are we all back? We're ready to continue? Okay, Vukani says yes. Komoto? Yes. Okay, and Mr. Dupe, I'm sure you're there. I will keep going then. Okay. Okay, so I was talking about synergy. So synergy is, the combined effects when, multiple departments work together successfully. They're interlinked and they're flowing, and they're just working. Things are flowing from one department to another, and it's just, it screams productivity. Okay, and what this says is that it's the benefit obtained from it is that the productivity or the result obtained is greater than what you could have ever obtained if one individual worked on its own or one department worked alone. So this is why we look for synthesis and synergy in departments and in organizations. Okay, so I'm going to show you the next slide, and I thought this was really interesting. So when we talk about synthesis and you go and you ask AI to generate an image, that says, hey, depict what a synergy is. And it literally gets it actually kind of gets a little trippy. It looks a little bit like space. But what we're seeing in the center here is all sorts of cogs and all sorts of mechanical wheels interlinked and, producing some sort of result together. And I think one of the other things that it was trying to depict was some sort of solar component or solar system. And that's because, in essence, our solar system is one large mechanical system that works hand in hand. It's like everything plugs in to a cogwheel, and one thing links to another. And that's very much like what synthesis is. And we're looking for the same kind of component, same kind of element when we look for synergy in an organization. We want the departments to be interlinked and plugged into each other so that when one department pushes a result, it leads to the other department having a similar result, and it allows for instant flow. Um, the only problem is if you're pushing for synergy and the departments are not agreeing, they're not pushing for it themselves, then you're not going to have a great synergy with an organization, and it's going to be more conflict and more challenging to roll out that way. Okay, so I thought this was a really interesting image, and I thought that it provides us with a great idea of what synergy is if you had to like visually depict it. And it kind of links to the world we live in, with all the complex components that link into each other so that things can actually happen, things can work the way they should. Okay, I will show you that even this picture was generated by AI, and I was looking to show like how synergy is all about people working together, collaboration, one thing leading to another, just moving things around and mobility, dynamicism, all of that would come into the space of synergy. Okay. Um, then we're looking at contextualization. And remember, when we're communicating, when we're working with others, you want to understand their background. So it's all about understanding workplace realities, so understanding the environment, the culture, the condition in which an HR has to operate or practice. Okay. It's very important to note that every environment will have its challenges, will have its norms, will have its dynamics. And it's very important that we develop a good understanding of these challenges, norms, and dynamics, because once you know what's happening in these areas, you're able to carry it forward and you're able to see what is exactly required, what kind of changes need to be made. It literally helps you to tailor your strategy to fit the organization's needs, which is what we're going for. Okay, remember that also as an HR manager, you're looking to be contextually aware, to ensure that your solutions are relevant and effective to what an organization needs. When we go in and we're trying to apply HRM. Okay, let us keep going. And when we look at the contextualization, I found this beautiful figure, and it plugs into another model I'm very familiar with. But I found that there's three layers to contextual awareness. So the first one is the macro context, which links to external factors like legal, economic, cultural influences. This you can tie macro to a pestle model, the environmental factors. You can even tie it to VUCA or BANI lenses. That is a great way to look at the world with. Then on the next layer, we have meso. Okay, and meso refers to organizational characteristics, industry norms, and sector-specific challenges. Okay, so you can see that it's a little more internal, but it still has that external component. So the sector-specific challenges and industry norms is still external, but it is, also looking at organizational characteristics, which is a little more internal. Okay, then with micro, we go straight into an organization. We're not looking at anything outside. It's going to be individual team dynamics, leadership styles, employee interactions, the culture, the organizational beliefs, the values, all of that would go into the micro environment. And you can see that every relationship, um, every different component will provides valuable insight. And what we find often when we look at contextualization in 3 layers, you'd find that the macro context has the greatest influence on the other environments. So your macro things such as your legal, economic, cultural influences, those tell us what we need to do in the meso and micro space. They're very informative. In the micro space, you can't be dictative and say that these are the laws that I'll follow when I'm practicing. Okay, you're told to do so by the macro environment where legal comes in, and that's just a great example of how macro influences the meso and micro spaces. Okay, great tool for contextualization and understanding it. And I will give bonus points to those of us who use this in our assignments because there is questions about contextualization. So I want to see, you guys using the 3 layers of context. Okay, let us keep going. Now, I just wanted to show you guys, this is another image I've generated using artificial intelligence, and this one shows different contexts, different settings. You can see that on the top left here, we're looking at what looks like London, although New York on the bottom of the car, but London. And then we have someone swimming in an ocean, and we have more ocean life, but a house in the ocean kind of thing. And then you have a living room on the bottom. I thought it was a great image. But the reason why I shared this with you is because at the end of the day, context matters. Contextualization is important. Understanding where your team, your employees, where they come from, who they are, what makes them who they are, is of the utmost importance. If you really want to, have an impact on them as an HR manager. Okay, so contextualization matters. And that's what I wanted to show you with this. Okay. So now I wanted to talk about learning resources, and I wasn't going to just come in and say, oh, let's look at AI. Sorry, I wasn't just going to say, let's look at textbooks and look at what internet can tell us. I wanted to look at what kind of resources we can use in the modern age. And there's so many new things that are coming to the forefront. So I'm looking at things such as AI. I'm looking at personalized learning paths. We're looking at trying to tailor a learning experience based on an individual's preferences and their current progress. We're looking at customized paths that enhance engagement and ensure that there's knowledge retention. Okay, with the new technologies that are coming out, it's becoming easier and easier to develop these personalized learning paths. And I think the other perspective that's not mentioned on the slides is that we also have a personal responsibility to ensure that we are getting the most out of our own learning journeys, that we're making the most out of our learning paths. Okay. The next one talks about adaptive learning, and we're looking at how AI adjusts course difficulty dynamically. And this is something that is going to come to the forefront as we delve deeper into the space of AI and AR. But what you'll see is that certain components or certain questions will be altered based on how well a student is performing. And maybe if a student is finding something easy, it will automatically be lifted to a high level. Or if a student is struggling, it would be lowered so that they can understand the foundational components again. And that is dynamic learning. That is dynamicism within education. And this is relevant to HR because at the end of the day, we are doing talent management. You're in charge of upskilling of staff members. Okay. Then again, under adaptive learning, we're looking at if we're adjusting our learning process, if we're being adaptive in our learning process, we're ensuring that the content remains relevant to the person receiving the information, and we're also driving up effectiveness of the learning course. Okay. And then I wanted to talk about AR, so augmented reality, which is coming to the forefront. We're not too far off of it. We are playing around in the space of visual and sensors, so touch and feel. When it comes to learning, and how we can take digital content and make it feel more realistic. We can have it feel more a lot like the physical world. And this enhances learning by integrating interactive visual elements. So I predict two ways that AR is going to come to the forefront. The first one is it's going to change textbooks. So we're not going to have physical textbooks anymore. We're going to have digital textbooks, and that's not new at all. We've had digital textbooks for a while now, but I think that it's going to add another component, and you're going to have AI that will be talking um, in the textbook. So, for example, if I was reading a book and it said to me, if I was reading a textbook about English literature and it said to me, hey, you have to go and write an essay on Jay Gatsby and The Great Gatsby. AI will be in that digital textbook, and it will allow me to prompt it like I'm having a conversation with Jay Gatsby, and it will allow me to get information about Jay Gatsby and his life so that I can write the essay that I'm supposed to do. And that's just one example of how augmented reality is going to come to the forefront. The other idea I have about where it's going, and none of this is really verified or validated, but I have an idea, is with the fire safety trainings and the jobs that are where you deal with the safety, health, those really difficult jobs where you can't really make a mistake, and they often do on-the-job training. But I think with augmented reality that you can simulate these things. So imagine if you're a firefighter and your job is to put out fires. With AR, you can have the firefighters going into buildings that are burning, and they can put out the fires, and that's how they get the training. The same thing could be done with medicine. And all of these would allow our professionals and our experts to get more practice. They're allowed to practice their craft a little more before they go and actually work on real people and deal with these things in the real world. And that's what we're looking for with AR. We're looking to simulate the things that we're not really able to simulate in the real world. Okay, I'll give an example of another thing that they're going to use AR for. They're going to use AR to simulate world disasters. So if you look at earthquakes and tsunamis in Japan, for example, they currently have a massive factory where they can simulate any kind of earthquake, and they build literal platforms that have houses on them, and then they simulate the earthquake. I think with augmented reality and AI, they soon will be doing all of this on a computer in a virtual space, as opposed to having the physical factory that takes up so much space and requires so much electricity to run. Okay, so that's just me, a little bit of a little bit of a rant about augmented reality and AI and how these are going to be the modern learning resources that will depend on and will lean towards. Okay. So then the benefits of AR is that it's going to boost engagement and visualization, the touch, the feel, those senses. It will also bridge the gap between theory and real world experiences. So we're able to actually have people live experiences as opposed to being told about them. Okay, it's the same as going on a roller coaster ride. You don't know until you've been on it. That's what the AR is going to do. It's going to put you in that seat and force you to go through a loop kind of thing. Okay. Cool. That is the learning resource. I'm going to keep going. Um, Now I wanted to talk about conflict management, and I know it's quite a shift away from AR and synergy and contextualization, but it is in our questions. I have to make sure you have something that will help you answer those questions. Okay, we have spoken about conflict management and disputes, especially in the space of communication. But conflict management involves the process of resolving disagreements and disputes effectively. It typically includes identifying sources of conflict, communication strategies, facilitating understanding, negotiation, and finding mutually beneficial solutions. Okay, so effective conflict management promotes healthy relationship and enhances team dynamics and fosters productivity. Okay, so now on the right-hand side, you'll see that we have some sort of diagram that shows us how to manage conflict, and it gives us different types of solutions we can use to deal with the conflict. Okay, so you'll see that on the on the y-axis we have assertiveness, and then on the x-axis we have cooperative. So you'll see that we go from low to high on both scales, and on the low assertive, low cooperative, we have avoiding each other. So this is the conflict resolution, which means people are just going to avoid each other. They're going to stay away from each other. It means that the conflict's been resolved, but they're still not really working together. And it's not the best possible outcome. Okay. Then on the on the left-hand side, on the high assertive but low cooperative, we have competing, okay, which means that people, the two people that were conflicting will not compete. And that's a good way to ensure that productivity remains up, but it does also mean that they're not really working together, they're still working against each other. So competing is a solution, but it's not really there. Okay. And then on the right hand side, with the high cooperative and low assertive, we have accommodating. So they're trying to find middle ground, they're trying to accommodate each other. It's not assertive though. It's not forced. It's just, I'll try and work around you, you try and work around me kind of thing. Okay. And then on the high assertive, high cooperative, we have collaborating. And collaborating is ideal. That's where you want to be. If you've been able to go from conflict to collaborating, you've really beat the system. Okay. But at the heart of all of these different conflict management resolutions, you'll see that there's compromise. So we're not going to have a solution if we're not compromising from any of the aspects. If you're avoiding, there's going to be compromise. If you're competing, there's compromise. If you're collaborating, there's compromise. If you're accommodating, there is compromise. And that is the key point I wanted to make with this visual representation of how to conflict manage. Okay, now I wanted to ask, Vukani, have you ever had to use one of these strategies to deal with conflict?
I think during my time in varsity, when we were doing group assignments, there was a need for collaboration and I think also accommodation, because sometimes you'd have to accommodate other people's opinions, even if you don't agree, just to work with them. And then also at the same time, there's collaboration where you're both putting forth ideas, taking the good points from both of them, and relinquishing the bad parts, so that you can come through with a more holistic, complete project. Yeah,
100%. Interesting. I think that is very true. Anyone who works on a group project at varsity has to deal with several of these different conflict management strategies. Okay, let me
that is
see.
true.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I will give you some confetti. Yeah, the best I can do for now. Komotso, do you want to talk to me? Have you used any of these strategies before?
I've worked in a very fast-paced environment where you deal with clients, and most of the time it gets to your coworkers. So and another thing is you work with people with different. Everybody's different. That's what I.
Mm.
It is different, and they've got their own opinions, and in my workspace, we've had to collaborate most of the time in order for us to achieve the same goal. So yeah,
Interesting, interesting. So you were forced to go high assertive, high cooperative
yeah, because we need to serve the client at the end
at
of
the
the
end of the day. Yeah, your issues don't matter.
so
Interesting. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to give you confetti too. I like your answer. I think it's great. It's just one of those situations where there's nothing you can do. You just have to, meet the client's needs. There's no delay. There's no time for arguments. You just have to collaborate. Okay, brilliant. In the interest of time, I'm going to continue, and I'll probe, I'll probe some of the other colleagues when we get to the next slide. Okay. So these slides are a little wordy, but I mean, how do you how do you discuss budgets, without discussing budgets? Okay, so some of the questions in your assignments is about setting budgets, and we all know what a budget is, okay? A budget is used to monitor spending, it's used to control costs, it's used to make informed decisions. So if we have a limited budget, then you have to make sure that you're working within that parameter. Okay, remember that in any kind of initiative, any kind of organization, we're dealing with the same kind of problem. Okay, the problem is that we have limited resources, but we have unlimited expenses, unlimited wants, unlimited desires, and we have to work within that, work with what we have. Okay, so effective budgeting involves forecasting, monitoring, and adjusting as needed to ensure financial stability and success. Okay, so this is just what what we're talking about in the space of budgets in an organization. Um, You'll see that I've included one of my favorite budget control tools, and it's called the buffer stock management system. And this is used by many organizations when they're trying to manage stock, especially your restaurants or places that have a high level of stock coming in and out. Okay, what they have is the buffer stock system. So the buffer stock system is used to ensure that you don't carry so much stock that you need to now purchase additional storage for the stock that you've got, but it's also used to make sure that you don't have so little stock that you won't be able to produce for the clients. So it's called the buffer stock graph or buffer stock diagram. You'll see that on the x-axis, we have both the reorder quantity and the buffer stock. Okay, then on the y-axis, we have time. So you'll see that if we follow the graph, you'll see that our stock starts high. So we're starting at the point where we just bought new stock. We're at maximum capacity of how much stock we can hold. Okay, then as time passes, we start using the stock. We start using it, using it, using it. It starts depleting. Okay, once we hit buffer stock, this is the point at which we need to start reordering our stock. Okay, and the gap between our maximum capacity to hold the stock and when we hit the buffer stock point, that's called lead time. So this is how much time you have before you have to start reordering the stock. Okay, so now you can decide where your reorder level is. On this diagram, they have the reorder level. Yeah, so they're saying once you've hit this point on the graph, you place the order, and you never get the order instantly. So that's why we have the buffer stock management system. So your stock will keep depleting, and then at some point you have replacement stock and you'll restart the process again. Hit the reorder level, reorder it, and then keep going. But on the bottom, you'll note that we haven't hit zero on the stock level because we always have buffer stock, and buffer stock is used to ensure that you never run low. Now, the other trick to using buffer stock is to make sure that when you get the new stock, you put it in from the bottom upwards. So your buffer stock, so let me just say, when I reorder and I get new stock at this point, the stock that I have that's buffer stock will be used first before I use the new stock. And that's the only way that the stock management system works. Otherwise, if you're dealing with perishable goods and you use the new stuff before you've used the buffer stock, your goods will go off, and it will, you've just wasted money. So it's very important that you also manage the stock that you're using and the sequence that you use it. But this is basically the buffer stock management system. I hope that if you haven't seen this before, it's something new, it's something exciting, and it's a great way to manage stock in general. Okay. It might not be applicable to all contexts or all organizations, but it is good to know. And if you can find a way to take this and use it in a transdisciplinary approach, that would be great. I'd like to see what you guys can do with it. How you can apply it to a context where you're not dealing with perishable goods, where you're not dealing with a high stock turnover. Okay, but yeah, I've used this for a while. I've seen it so many times. It's one of my favorite stock management systems, so I like presenting it. Okay, um, let us keep going. I also wanted to say that it does tie into supply chain management a little, and it also provides stability in that space. So just note that. Okay. Now we want to talk about development of policies, and this I put in again because you have questions about it. Okay, so I'm trying to assist you with those questions where it talks about how to develop a policy. Okay, so I have a figure that gives us 11 steps to developing a policy, and that's a lengthy step, a lengthy process, and it's even layered. So there's that to add to it too. So the first step is to identify the need for the new policy. So why do we need this policy? What is the gap we're trying to bridge? What is the behavior we're trying to accommodate in the organization? Okay. Then the next one is assigning a policy author and approver. So who's going to write it? Who's going to read it? Who's going to review it? And who's going to approve it? Okay. The third step is to do research and collect data. It's to engage with subject matter experts on the topic. You can't just go about, developing a policy without having some sort of expert opinion weighted in on it. Okay. And these first three steps are all about setting the agenda. So it's setting the agenda for development of this policy. Okay. The next 3 steps are about creation. So it's actually writing the policy, going and, writing it out. The step number 5 is reviewing and revising the document, circling it amongst subject experts, getting their opinions. And then the last step is about having it approved. Okay. And all of this was about creation. It's our creation step. Okay. Then our next step is implementation. So number 7 says distribute the policy to relevant individuals and departments. And then it says number 8 says obtain policy acknowledgement, so people sign it off, they acknowledge that this is the new practice. And then number 9 says you train it. You start to, you do training sessions, workshops. You explain what the policy is about, why it's been introduced, how it's meant to improve an organization. And then in our last phase, it's all about maintenance. So you can't just develop a policy and then write it, introduce it, have it trained and implemented, and then just forget about it. Policies have to be maintained, they have to be updated regularly. And the reason why this is because we live in a very dynamic world. The world is constantly changing. There's a great need for being adaptable, being flexible. And often organizations that are up to date with their policies are the ones that do very well. Okay. So in the maintenance, step number 10 says reporting and monitoring. So reporting on the policy's implementation, monitoring how well it's being implemented, monitoring how well it fits into the organization and the context. Because remember what I said, context matters. Okay. Then 11 says review and make possible updates. So you're going to have to review. Nothing's going to fit perfectly. So you're going to have to continuously review it and make the updates, and then roll it out in a similar fashion again. You won't have to follow the agenda setting, but you will have to go and do the writing of it and reviewing again if you're making amendments to the policy. Okay, so this is just a nice little diagram. It shows you how to develop a policy. I hope it helps you when you answer some of those questions. Okay. Now, I want to talk about root cause analysis. Root cause analysis is a brilliant tool we use in problem solving. And I was happy to see that they didn't ask you questions about problem solving, but they asked you questions about RCA directly. So it was nice to see it. I knew immediately I can throw this in, I can talk about this. Yeah. So what most people do wrong when they try to solve a problem is they actually start by tackling the symptoms. And the symptoms are the first things we see when a problem occurs. And the interesting thing is when you deal with a symptom, you might eliminate the symptom for a short amount of time, but the problem will still occur, which means that symptom will return again. And that's a great sign of poor problem solving. Okay, so what the RCA model says, if you want to really solve a problem, you not only need to identify what the symptoms are, but you need to dig deeper. You need to dig past the problem itself, and then you need to actually go straight to the root cause of it and identify what is the cause of the problem. Okay, so above the surface, you can see the symptoms of the problem. And when you start digging deeper, you'll find the root cause of the problem. Okay, and I have an example of how this works. It's a simple example. It's in the next slide. Okay, so the problem that occurred was that I ran a red light. So imagine I'm driving to work, I skip a red light. Okay, why did I run the red light? Well, I'm late for work. How often does that happen? Quite often, so it's realistic. Why was I late for work? Well, I woke up late. Okay, why did I wake up late? Well, my alarm didn't work. Okay, why didn't my alarm work? Well, the battery was exhausted. Okay, why was the battery exhausted? I forgot to check. And just like that, you can see we've gotten to the root cause of the problem. Okay, now that you've gotten to the root cause of the problem, you can decide on a course of action that will allow you to have a proper solution to the problem. Okay, so solution number 1, replace the batteries. Do you think that that solution would work, replacing the batteries? I think not. I think it won't. I think what you need to do is consider an alternative, because batteries will need to be replaced again and again and again. So you can consider a digital alarm, one that you plug in. Digital alarms won't work in the South African context because we have load shedding. So context matters. Okay. So the best solution we could have to this problem is start using your phone as an alarm, and that would really solve the problem. Okay. So this is just an example of how we can run the RCA process. Okay, I hope it's simple. I hope that it carries through to some of the problems we deal with in the HRM space. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So then we have cost benefit analysis. So with the cost benefit analysis, we're trying to compare the costs to the benefits of a decision, or a project to determine whether the benefits actually outweigh the costs. It helps decision makers to understand potential impacts for informed choices on resource allocation or policy implementation. Okay, and I even have a quote from Investopedia that says it's a systematic process of evaluating the desirability of a decision by weighing out all the benefits and the costs. Okay, the cost benefit analysis is a great way to look at a project or a decision you have to make and to really weigh out all the costs and the benefits and to see whether what we're doing is actually worthy of the costs. Are we really going to get a benefit from this? And you'll find yourself saying no to some really interesting projects or decisions that you have to make as an organization, because most times the costs are too much and the benefits are too little. Okay. I have a little bit of a slide on the CBA, but I'm going to skip this, the video. I have a little bit of a video on cost benefit analysis, but I'm going to skip that for now. I will keep going in the interest of time. Just want to see how much just have to, I have 7 slides. Okay, so I'm going to play the video. Let's play the video and then we can discuss. Okay. We still have a good 30 minutes scheduled. I'm not going to use all the time, don't worry. But let me play the video. We can have a discussion about it.
Let's talk about cost-benefit analysis. By using this simple and objective technique, you can make a confident decision about whether to go ahead with a new project or initiative. Before we start, cost-benefit analysis is ideal when considering the viability of non-critical financial decisions. Where projects involve large sums of money or a significant business impact, other return on investment techniques may be more appropriate. So as the name suggests, cost-benefit analysis simply involves comparing the benefits of a course of action and contrasting these with the costs associated with it. So how do we do that? Firstly, brainstorm all the benefits of the project, both direct and indirect, and make a list of these. At this point, if there aren't many benefits, your project may not be viable. Then do the same for all costs, both direct and indirect, associated with your project. Try to anticipate any unexpected costs and benefits by considering what may change over the lifetime of the project. Step 2 then is to assign a monetary value to the costs, including the physical resources needed, as well as the cost of the human resource for the duration of the project. It's important that you think about as many related costs as you can, including training on new systems or processes, and any reduction in revenue if productivity falls in the short term. Remember to think about costs that will continue to be incurred once the project is finished. For example, consider whether you'll need additional staff, if your team will need ongoing training, or if you'll have increased overheads. Step 3 is to assign a monetary value to the benefits, and this is usually more difficult than step 2. Firstly, it's often very difficult to predict revenues accurately, especially for new products. Secondly, along with the financial benefits that you anticipate, there are often intangible benefits that are important outcomes of the project also. For instance, what's the impact on customers or patients, the environment, employee satisfaction, or health and safety? Can you quantify the monetary value of that impact? The best approach here is to consult with other stakeholders and decide how you'll agree to value these intangible items. Step 4 then is to compare the costs and benefits. So finally, compare the value of your costs to the value of your benefits, and use this analysis to decide your course of action. To do this, calculate your total costs and your total benefits and compare the two values to determine whether your benefits outweigh the costs. At this stage, it's important to consider the payback time to find out how long it will take for you to reach the break-even point. So the point in time at which the benefits have just repaid the costs. In summary then, cost-benefit analysis is a simple tool for helping to establish a project's viability. Firstly, we list all the anticipated costs and benefits associated with the project. Next, we assign monetary values to each of these. We engage key stakeholders to agree how to value any intangible benefits. And finally, we analyse whether the benefits outweigh the costs and make an informed decision. So how can you use this in your world?
Okay, brilliant. Just keep going. Okay, go back one. Okay, cool. I would like to hear from some of you guys to see what you think about the video I just presented. Let's start with Mr. Dupe. You still driving?
I just got to the house now.
I see. How much of the video
yeah.
were you able to get?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the video shows an in-depth detail on cost benefits pertaining to projects, since I've done so many projects. This is very important tool and breakdown to do when you're running projects, especially to see what is the benefit of the project to the team and the company and what it will bring, and external stakeholders. So that's my observation.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. I appreciate that. And I do think that the cost benefit analysis has such a practical application in the space of project management and running projects successfully. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dupe. I'll just hit you, some confetti there. Let me hear from, who do we hear from? Let me hear from Komoto. What do you think about cost benefit analysis? I am probing and asking a lot more, but I didn't see you for the first half of the session.
I've never run a project before, so but I think this video, like Mr. Dube says, it shows a lot, and I think if our government can also maybe we would achieve a lot as a country. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay, I like the perception. I like that you're sharing a bit more of where you think this could be applied. I think sometimes in government they don't do the CBA. They don't. I think they just roll out and they see what they can do. Yeah, but let's not discuss the government. Okay. Yeah, a lot of organizations use cost benefit analysis before they make very important decisions. They wouldn't allow their organization to be wasteful in any way, or any shape, manner, or form. I'm not saying that government is wasteful or they have had successful budgeting implementation in some areas, and they've been successful they've been unsuccessful in other areas. And that the same could be said for business. I think the trick for government is they're represented on several fronts where business typically stands on its own. There's not one business that represents every business kind of thing. Okay. Let us keep going in the interest of time. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a needs analysis. And it's very important to note that a needs analysis in HR refers to the systematic process of identifying and assessing the requirements, so skills and capabilities of employees within an organization. And we're looking, this analysis helps HR professionals to understand the current and future needs of the organization in terms of workforce and what is expected of that workforce. Can remember that the jobs we work are shifting. And a lot of the jobs that exist now will not exist in the future. And this is because we're living through what is the fourth and fifth industrial revolution. It is HR's responsibility to ensure that they're keeping staff members up to skill and that they know what's happening in their job spaces, their job fields. It's very important to note that those individuals get the training that's required, that they're keeping the organization in the loop in terms of what is required for each field. Okay. And that's why we do the needs analysis. A great way to approach a needs analysis, depending, it doesn't matter what kind of situation you're doing, but I'd always recommend the SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis is a framework that uses or evaluates an organization's competitive position to develop a strategic plan. Okay, and we can use SWOT analysis. What I did is I always take it a step further. I just include this so people know what it is. I'm sure everyone knows what SWOT analysis is. What's been embedded in our thought process from grade 7 onwards. But I take it a step further and I add these additional components to the SWOT analysis, and it allows you to really consider what is working for an HR department and what's not. So you'll see that when we look at strengths and weaknesses, these are components that always fall within the internal space or within an organization. And as an HR manager, you can look at your department, you can look at the different departments, you can see the strengths and weaknesses that they contribute to the organization. Okay. You can also then take it a step further and look at the external components, which would mean looking at the opportunities and the threats. What are the opportunities? Where can we generate more income? Which markets can we break into? Okay, and then the threats are things that are a threat to the organization's survival. It's a threat to the organization's revenue. Okay. And then we can even alter our lens and we can start looking at our strengths and opportunities as helpful components, to the organization. And how can we use our strengths to overcome our weaknesses? How can we use our strengths to capitalize on opportunities? How can we use our strengths to mitigate and eliminate threats? Okay. And then the harmful components would be the weaknesses and the threats. So how can we use the opportunities to overcome threats? How can we use opportunities to improve our weaknesses? That kind of thinking when looking at gap analysis is very important. Okay, I do take gap analysis a little further, and I'll show you what I mean. So I do have a little bit of an outline in terms of how you can approach gap analysis, but I wanted to first talk about the three different states. And the three different states I'm alluding to is the three states that you'd find in systems thinking. So in systems thinking, you'd have the current state, you'd have the desired state, which is where you want to go, and then you have the as it will be state. And that's the state that exists when you take zero or no action to alter the course that you're following. Okay, so on this graph here, this would be our current state. And if we don't alter our action, we don't change our behavior, this is where we would go. But then the desired state speaks to where we want to be. And if we alter our course of action, we redirect our focus, this is where we could be. And this would be the desired state. So understanding these three different states would allow you to really get an understanding of what the gap is between where you are now and where you want to be, and where you will go if you don't take any action. Okay, and that's the kind of gap analysis I want you guys to be doing. You can even apply the SWOT analysis tool to the gap analysis, to understand the different states. I took this a step further and I actually even defined the different states. So your current state is the now, it's where you are. It involves understanding your current situation, your performance levels, your current processes. Okay, it's literally collecting information to understand what the problem is, where you are. It's a realistic view of where you stand. A SWOT analysis is great for understanding your current strategic position. Okay, the as it will be refers to the state where you haven't taken action, you haven't done anything, to alter the course of action. You're just following the same trajectory. Okay, it requires an understanding of trends, growth rates, and other factors that could influence future states. Okay, and then you have your desired state. So this is where you want to be. This involves clearly defining your objectives, and it also talks about what you want to achieve, where, what is the organizational goals, what is the vision, or what are the long-term goals. It all comes to the desired state. But it has to be both ambitious and realistic, which is a tall order, it's a tall ask, but it's one of the requirements. It also has to align with overarching and overall strategic goals that the organization has. Okay, and that is basically the outline. That's how I would approach doing a gap analysis. I'd look at the states and I'd see which tools I can apply to identify the current state, what tools I can use to show me what it will be like. So a forecasting tool, and then I would use tools to help me identify a desired state. Okay. That is what we use to wrap our session up with for tonight. Okay, I know we've covered a lot of topics, a lot of concepts, but if you look at the workbook on the Google Classroom platform, you'll see that there's a lot of questions. It's a wide array of topics and concepts. I touched the surface of most of it, but the rest would require you to go and look at the learner guides, to do research, to see what you can find. Okay, so before I wrap or end our session off for the evening, I would like to know if we're all good, if there's any questions. I'll start with Vukani.
So far I'm all good. I just find the topics really interesting. I feel like also I've been engaged so far. A lot of it have really opened my mind to things that I normally see on a day-to-day basis, but also seen from afar. So now understanding it, understanding those concepts and how they work is also really good.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I like that it's brought you closer to the concepts and the topics. Okay, great stuff. Happy
Yeah.
to hear that. Mr. Dube, how are you feeling? You all good? You ready to tackle the formative and summative?
All good from my side. Just have to put and do the work now. Yeah.
There's a lot of work. I've warned you.
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Komotso?
Yes. Yes, I'm all good. There was a lot that was shared today. Thank you so much. Yeah, now it's time to do the work.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay. And then Coach, I'd just like to thank you for hopping in. It's always nice to have guests in the sessions. Yeah, always nice to have a guest around. Thank you. Okay. If we're all good, we don't have any questions, we can end the session off there for tonight. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
You.
Take care, ma'am.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.